This is Rise. Let's lock in with the goal of changing one life at a time. Yours. Together, let us rise up, inspire, strengthen, and elevate our minds. It's time to rise on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Saran Heron, and welcome to Rise. Today we're going to talk about the essential of self-care and ways to help create peace no matter how hectic life becomes. You can rise above it. Alexandra Free is a self-care advocate, caregiving expert, and the author of From Zero to Zen, a guide to help you thrive as a caregiver. Alexandra Free is here to discuss the importance of self-care for caregivers and share a simple 10-minute ritual she created to help caregivers and also non-caregivers create some peace in the middle of whatever chaos life is throwing at you. She is here to share with us her story as she identified with Hemming Willis and tell us about her daily panic attacks and depression. Alexandra Free, welcome to Rise here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. I'm very happy to be here.
Let's get right into it. Tell us about becoming a self-care advocate. When did you decide you want to help others?
Initially, I didn't set out to become a self-care advocate, but I was a caregiver to my mother who had Alzheimer's. And I had started really spiraling down into a deep depression and daily panic attacks. And that was just something that sort of came out of that chaos where I suddenly realized like nobody's coming to save me. It's got to be me. And so I started really honing in on skills that I think a lot of us already have self-care practices and we don't really realize they're self-care practices, but I just started becoming very intentional with my self-care. And I realized that it's so easy when you're a caregiver to, you're so focused on caring for others that you neglect actually caring for yourself. And that's sort of where it was all born.
So tell us why you believe self-care is just so important and we need to practice that.
Well, I mean, if you're not caring for yourself, it's hard to care for others. I mean, it's initially we're so focused on our to-do lists. And, I think our initial reaction to-do lists and getting stressed because of our ever-growing to-do lists is to do more and throw more at it. And while it sort of makes sense, like, if I just get to the ballot, like get through everything I need to do, I will suddenly someday not have something that I have to do, and then I can take care of myself. But it doesn't really work that way. You start to deplete all your energy and you really can't pour from an empty vessel. You can't give when you've got nothing left to give. You can't give to other people if you have nothing. So, it's kind of like a car. You have to keep filling up your tank. And when you're a caregiver, you often feel like that's a selfish thing to do, that you should be caring for whoever it is that you're caring for, and that taking any time out for yourself is actually selfish, but it's actually essential. And it's kind of the opposite. If you're not taking care of yourself, you really have nothing to give to others. So, and it's so funny because it seems so obvious and yet it's not. And I talk to so many caregivers who just constantly feel guilty for even going out for a walk by themselves and not wanting anybody to go with them. But it's an important mindset to get into.
So I want you to share with us, what are some self-care practices that you do on a daily basis?
Well, it could be something as simple as having a cup of tea to yourself, going somewhere, sitting out in nature, but unplugging your phone, not thinking about what somebody else needs of you, and just sort of contemplating what it is that you're enjoying. You're enjoying your tea. You're enjoying the sound of the birds. I mean, these are simple. They sound so non-self-care-ish, but it's actually very simple. Taking a bath at night. I take a bath every single night. I lock myself in the bathroom. I do not bring my phone. Sometimes I light candles. Sometimes I listen to music. But it's just, 10, 15 minutes a day that is just for me, where I'm not worried about what anybody else is thinking, or if somebody else wants me to do something, or even if anybody needs to go to the bathroom. We have a couple of bathrooms in the house, so I'm not preventing people from using the bathroom, but it's just important to intentionally take time for yourself. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific thing. Self-care doesn't have to be going to the spa. It could be grabbing your favorite book and just spending time with your book. And it doesn't have to be lavish, but it has to be mindful, and it has to be just for you.
Now, life is hectic for some people. They work 2 jobs to let ends meet, or they're even going to college to pursue their dreams, and they have no time for self-care is what they want to tell themselves. What would you tell him or her?
Well, I would make a list and start to think about like little things that you enjoy. And again, it doesn't have to be lavish. It could be, you listen to a podcast that you love, and you just plug in your earbuds and just let the world melt away. You could, if you're commuting on a bus. I mean, I used to commute into the city for work, and I mean, a lot of people are stressed out while they're commuting, but I sort of was like, great. My mom's nowhere to be found. I can't get to her, I'm good. This is my time. And I used that. I meditated on the bus on the way into work, and I do transcendental meditation. So I would do that on the bus. And then on the ride home, I'd listen to a podcast, or listen to music. Sometimes it could be as simple as playing a game on your phone. It doesn't have to be some big grand gesture. But the whole point is that stress floods your body with cortisol and other stress hormones. And what you're trying to do is relieve the stress to lower the cortisol. And that happens when you start to calm down. So for what calms me down could be something very different for what calms you down. I wouldn't necessarily listen to heavy metal music that raises certain different, levels in your brain, but listening to calming music, it doesn't have to be grandiose. It just has to be calming for you.
I know you talk about Hemming Willis, and you identify with her as it relates to caring for a loved one and the impact it can have on one's life. Talk to us about that.
It's really hard if everybody knows or doesn't know that Emma Hemming Willis is Bruce Willis's wife. And Bruce Willis has, recently it's come out that he has dementia. And there's something particularly horrifying about being a caregiver to a person with dementia. Horrifying might not be the right word, but heartbreaking. And being a caregiver to anybody, cancer, whatever your loved one might have, is horrible, and it's hard to experience. But there's something particularly difficult about dementia. First is there's no hope. There's currently no cure. It's not like they're going to go into remission, but you're also watching them disappear. It's a constant state of grief, and you're watching it unfold before your eyes. Their ability to communicate, their ability to remember things that they used to love, eventually their ability to function. And it's heartbreaking. And, a lot of people, I think, I've heard on social media, some people, it's horrible, but some people, say, oh, well, it's not so hard being a caregiver when you're a multimillionaire. And that might be true. You can hire people to help you, but it doesn't take away the pain of watching somebody you love disappear before your eyes. And the stress also of you want to be there for them and you feel guilty when you're not. And she had been talking about, she went and took a hike and she felt guilty about doing something for her. And it's a constant juggling act of trying to be there for them and, again, being there for yourself. And the guilt that often comes with taking care of yourself is sort of, my whole point in the need for self-care is you have to give yourself that grace and you have to give yourself that space to care for yourself. And for her, it's, she went out for a hike and she started talking about how hard that is. Because you feel guilty. You feel like you should be there. And then she had said that, but Bruce would want her to take care of herself. And it is just this never ending battle with yourself. Like, how much can you give? How much should you give? Are you giving enough? You're constantly feeling like you're not doing enough. With Alzheimer's and dementia, the person is constantly getting worse. There is no like, oh my God, we're getting better. We're healing. You're constantly, it's like the reverse of taking care of a child, where the child learns and grows. When you're taking care of somebody with dementia, they're suddenly shrinking away, and it can really mess with your mental health.
You are listening to Rise on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking to Alexandra Free. It's a self-care advocate, caregiving expert, and the author of From Zero to Zen, a guide to help you thrive as a caregiver. She is here to discuss the importance of self-care for caregivers and share a simple 10-minute ritual she created to help caregivers and non-caregivers create some peace in the middle of whatever chaos life is throwing at you. Now, bring us back to the day you first had your first anxiety attack. Tell us what happened.
Well, it wasn't necessarily my first anxiety attack, but it was the anxiety attack or the panic attack that changed everything. And I had been, for about a month, I had been waking up at 5 a.m. with these severe panic attacks. And I would just lie in bed praying for help, somebody to help me. And like, make it stop. All of a sudden, a little voice just kind of popped into my head and was like, you got to get your act together. It's not exactly what it said. It swore at me, and I was sort of like, wait a minute, how dare you? What do you mean? But I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh my God, the voice was right. Like, nobody's going to come and save me. I have to do it myself. What I was having a panic attack about was I was paying out of pocket. I eventually got my mother on Medicaid, but I was paying out of pocket for her assisted living facility, and the price, it was $8,000 a month, and I was running out of money, and I was freaking out, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I realized, lying in bed praying for help. I mean, it wasn't like a pile of cash was going to come out of the ceiling. It would have been nice, but I wasn't expecting that to happen. So I was like, all right, I can't think. My head's like just swarming with all these like, oh my God, you're going to die. You're going to be homeless. You're not going to be able to take care of your mother. Your mother and you are going to be out on the streets. Like, all these horrible things were swimming around in my head. And when you're having a panic attack or an anxiety attack, you're often freaking out about something that isn't happening at the moment. Like, at the moment, I was lying in my bed in my home. I was safe. But anxiety attacks and panic attacks kind of are like worst case scenarios on steroids. And you're suddenly freaking out about something that's not actually occurring. And I knew this, logically, I knew this. So I was like, all right, I have to pull myself back and I have to figure this out. And I know I can't figure out a plan while I'm having anxiety. So I have to figure out a way to stop the anxiety. And I had been practicing meditation for years, but for some reason, in the midst of all my anguish and panic and freaking out about how I was going to pay bills, I sort of started forgetting about all the tools I already had. So what I did was I started creating what I called Zen in 10, which was basically, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to just focus on trying to calm my mind so that I could hopefully at some point stop these panic attacks. And then I could start coming up with solutions. I knew I couldn't come up with a solution in the middle of the panic attack, but I figured if I could calm myself, maybe then I could start seeing lights at the end of the tunnel. And so I just started creating these little rituals. What I didn't know at the time, I picked 10 minutes because I figured I can do anything for 10 minutes. I can calm myself for 10 minutes, take 10 minutes out of freaking out about how I'm going to pay the bills, and then I'll just go about my day. What I found out later on is that actually there is scientific evidence to show that 10 minutes a day, more would be good. But if you can carve out 10 minutes a day to just kind of calm your mind, get the cortisol lowered, your brain can actually start creating new neural passageways that will, you can kind of undo what's going on. And, again, I didn't know it at the time. I just thought, hey, 10 minutes, I can do anything for 10 minutes. And so then I just started creating these little rituals, and they changed every day, but it was just 10 minutes of calming down and centering and realizing the sky wasn't falling. I wasn't getting kicked out of my house. Like, mom and I were alive. We were okay, and things were going to be okay. And the more you calm down, the more you start to realize things are okay. And you also start to see opportunities that you couldn't see when you were freaking out. There's some science behind it, but there's also, it's just common sense when you're, flailing around and losing your grip on reality. It's hard to solve problems.
Now, you mentioned that you suffered a period of time where you said you were depressed. How did you know you were depressed?
Well, I don't actually suffer from depression. I know people who do suffer from depression. So I've never been diagnosed with depression. And of course, we all feel depressed about things from time to time, but I realized that this was something I wasn't things that would generally be able to pull me out of a dark sadness or whatever, they weren't working. I was really losing my ability to find joy in anything. It's when I realized, I was like, this is, again, when you're a caregiver, it's, sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel because it's day in, day out. It's kind of like Groundhog's Day, and you get through your day and then you wake up and it's the same thing or worse. And it's hard to find, I don't know, just, there's no lighthouse, there's no beacon, there's nothing saying, okay, this is going to be okay. And if you can get through this, it's going to be fine. It's, and I went to doctors and I didn't take any medication or anything. And I just started again, realizing I had a toolbox full of things that I had done in the past. And one of the things that I found the most helpful for me when I was depressed was walking my dog, getting out into nature and walking my dog. She enjoyed it too. But there's something being in nature. Is scientific evidence to show that obviously sunlight is good for us, but also being in trees, being by the beach. There's certain grounding on the earth. It's actually a therapy. It's called grounding, where you take your shoes off and you put your feet in the dirt or on the grass and you get the electromagnetic field from the earth. And, I pulled myself out of my funk by physically interacting with nature. And it's also, I think it's helpful. And again, back to the caregiving, your world becomes very small. And, sometimes, the only person you see for a couple of days is the person you're caring for. And it's good to just get out and be around other people, and your world starts to get a little bit bigger and bigger. And for me, walking my dog, my neighbors would start talking to me and they'd invite me over for, a glass of wine or a cup of coffee. And it pulls you out of that little, I don't know, box that you've put yourself in. And I think the more you interact, the more you realize you're not alone. And I think that's one of the problems with caregiving, is that you really do feel like you're all alone in the world sometimes. And it's important to reach out to, friends, family, therapists. If you're religious, your priest or your rabbi, it's important to remember you're not alone in this. And it's very easy to feel like you are when you're a caregiver, especially a caregiver to somebody with dementia, because it's often hard to bring them anywhere. So you're stuck inside with them a lot.
You are listening to Rise on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking to Alexandra Free as a self-care advocate, caregiving expert, and the author of From Zero to Zen, a guide to help you thrive as a caregiver. She is here to discuss the importance of self-care for caregivers and share a simple 10 minutes ritual she created to help caregivers and non-caregivers create some peace in the middle of whatever chaos life is throwing at you. So, Alexandra, I just have a few questions that I'm interested to ask you. So, you mentioned your mom suffered from Alzheimer's, and on a daily basis, which we know, as you've said before, it's very challenging. Tell us on a daily basis, what was the most challenging thing for you caring for your mom?
I would say the most challenging thing for me was her inability. I mean, it sounds silly, her inability to remember, but it sounds ridiculous. But talking to somebody who, the moment you've spoken to them, they ask you the same question over and over and over again, and they tell you you shouldn't correct them. And in and of itself, that's a challenge. But, trying to interact and trying to move forward with your day, like you're making breakfast, you're making lunch, you're making dinner, whatever you're doing, and having the same conversation, it's kind of like time-space continuum sort of stops and starts at the same time. So you're trying to go forward, but you're having the same conversations, or you are trying to feed them and they don't remember how to eat. I mean, there's definitely weird, not only do they they don't remember how to eat, and that's its own thing, but they don't remember what they like. It's a horrible situation that I hope nobody ever has to get into. I mean, then there's the bathing and all that other stuff, but the constant,
not knowing, like you said, right? Not remembering.
I mean, it's just it's strange when somebody that you've looked up to and who's your parent and who has spent their life with you suddenly turns into somebody who, like, for instance, my mother, all the foods she used to love, she suddenly didn't like anymore. And we would go out. Initially, we would be at restaurants and we would order what she always wanted or always ate. And then suddenly she no longer wants that. There's like a frustration involved with, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
I think you did the best you can. Now tell us, as a speaker, you are having conversations with other professionals. Share with us some people that you're working with today, as well as trying to help them talk about self-care and just how to, again, have that peace while dealing with all these challenges and taking care of one.
Well, I'm talking with some of the people I work with are self-care coaches. I'm talking with doctors who they have like neuro vitamins and, brain health. There isn't a cure for Alzheimer's. So I'm talking to a lot of doctors and nutritionists who are focused on preventative ways of combating Alzheimer's, trying to slow it down or trying to prevent it by, either nutrients or diets. Mediterranean diet is a very popular course of action currently. It's considered the best diet to be on for brain health. And then there's doctors who also talk about ways to keep your cognitive abilities heightened. So some people suggest reading, exercising. Again, diet's a very big part of that. Unfortunately, they don't really know what causes Alzheimer's. So it's, there are genes, but then even if you have those genes, you're not necessarily going to, like, Alzheimer's won't actually occur, even though you have the gene that is associated with it. So there's a lot of guesswork, but keeping healthy and keeping active and keeping, your brain functioning, I don't know, seems to be the main focus for doctors these days.
Now, you're the author From Zero to Zen. Tell us why you wrote that book. And for someone listening, how is this book able to help them?
Well, really, I wrote the book because, a lot of people I talked to, it was shocking to me how little people know about the people they love, as far as their medical wishes or their medical history. And I started coaching people who were going through similar things that I had gone through. And again, it was shocking to me that they didn't have the right legal documents. Like a lot of people don't know their parents' financial or their loved ones' financial information. And so basically I wrote this book because it was everything that I had gone through with my mother. But prior to my mother, my father was in the hospital for 7 months. And when he landed in the hospital in the ER, I had no idea what to do. So I basically learned everything I needed to learn by going through what I went through with my father. And it was shocking to me how unprepared I was. And so basically my book is really a manual, everything you need to know from A to Z about being a caregiver. But it's not just, dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's or something. It's really, it starts at the beginning with the legal documents. If you don't have the appropriate legal documents, you really can't get anything done. You need the power of attorney. You need to know, you need to have a healthcare proxy. You should have a living will, which is what your loved ones, whether they want to be put on life support, if they don't want to be put on life support, a will too. A lot of people think, well, my family doesn't really have a lot of money. I don't need a will, but it really does help with, does your loved one want to be buried? Does your loved one want to be cremated? So there's the legal documents, and then there is obviously all the medical information. If your loved one's on certain medications, if they have food allergies or what kind of medication. And then there's also financials. You need to know, do they have a mortgage? Are they paying rent? Do they have online banking? Do you have the banking passwords? You need to have all of the medical, all of the financial, all of the banking information. And then it also talks about long-term care, Medicaid. A lot of people don't understand that long-term care is not paid for by regular life or health insurance. And then there's also life insurance, and life insurance in some cases can also take care of long-term care. So all of that is spelled out in the book.
Excellent. What's one advice you want to leave with us today for those listening to the program?
Honestly, I would say first and foremost, if you are taking care of a loved one, the most important thing you can possibly do is make sure you have the appropriate legal documents. Without the appropriate legal documents, you will not be able to advocate for them, or at least not advocate for them as successfully as you would like to.
And how can someone connect with you as well as get the copy of your book?
You can go to my website, alexandrafree.com. You can also download on my website, you can download a 22-page caregiver master checklist. So you can actually go through the checklist and make sure you have all the right documents and everything. It's all in there. And I'm also on Instagram under alexandrafree.com.
I'm Dr. Saran Heron. Self-care is important to our well-being. I thank you, Alexandra, for being here. And let's please ensure we're taking good care of ourselves, loving ourselves, making time for ourselves, no matter how busy life gets. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Rise, available wherever you listen to podcasts and always right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.